the Mariners ended up trading this weekend a top 100 prospect and their number 4 prospect and a catching prospect at that, Harry Ford, to the Washington Nationals for left-handed reliever Jose Ferrer. And I think initially I was really, really surprised at this. I was really surprised that that's all it took. And this is not a disrespect to Ferrer. It's just looking at the numbers objectively. I was surprised that that's all it took to acquire a catching prospect and one that's pretty highly touted in Harry Ford. Now, I don't know if Ford is going to turn out to be a stellar defender. I know his bat is getting better and better as the years go on. He's always had a pretty good baseline offensive game. His defense is coming along. I don't think he's ever going to be stellar. And we also know that he was blocked by Cal Raleigh, who basically catches every night for the Seattle Mariners. But I was a little bit initially surprised that that's all it took to go get Harry Ford. And my mind kind of immediately went to, did the Phillies not want to trade Matt Strahm? Because we talked about it a couple weeks ago, and it was reported in the Seattle Tribune, I believe, or the Seattle Times. I apologize, I forget which one it was. But one of the reports was that the Mariners were looking for left-handed help, and Matt Strahm's name was connected to the Mariners because they were looking for left-handed help, and the Phillies have 3 left-handed relievers in their bullpen. We also talked about that a few weeks ago, that I don't necessarily believe that means that the Phillies are going to trade a lefty, but it's somewhere at a position of strength that they could utilize to maybe move and acquire another piece, especially if their free agency doesn't go according to plan. So my mind immediately went to, well, I'm surprised the Phillies weren't in on that for a Matt Strahm deal or a Tanner Banks deal. But I did have to kind of adjust my thought process a little bit, because I do believe that Matt Strahm is better than Jose Ferrer. I think Ferrer's stuff, especially his fastball, is better than Strahm's. But we've talked about Strahm a lot on this show. You know how much I value him and how much I like him. He's just a guy who goes out there and pitches like a dog. He's just a dude who pitches well, even though his fastball sits 92, 91, 93, somewhere in that range. He'll attack right-handed hitters. He's not afraid to get up in their kitchen a little bit. He'll face lefties and righties. He could give you multiple innings if you need to. We know the deficiency of Strahm coming in a high-leverage spot when there's runners on. We'd much prefer Strahm at a clean inning. But I do think that Strahm has a proven track record in Major League Baseball that Ferrer, just as of right now, does not. But you take a look at the numbers comparably, and again, that's where it kind of comes into play. Strahm's ERA was over a full 1.5 better than Ferrer's. His whip, 0.2 better. They had the same amount of strikeouts despite Strahm throwing 14 less innings. The bottom line, however, is where I think the Mariners start to value this conversation. Matt Strahm has 1 year left on his deal at $7.5 million. Jose Ferrer is in pre-arbitration. He has 5 years of team control left between pre-arb and arbitration that will take him through 2031 before he becomes an unrestricted free agent. Matt Strahm had another really good year. Maybe it wasn't as good as 2024 where he was just dominant, but he was very reliable. Meanwhile, Jose Ferrer's numbers were a little bit up and down, and I think that that's a little bit surprising to me that Ferrer is all it took to acquire Harry Ford. But I will say this. The guy that you saw in the first couple of months of the season, the Jose Ferrer that pitched on opening day, the guy that pitched against the Phillies in April, is not the same Jose Ferrer that pitched in the back half of the season. So over 3 appearances in the first couple weeks against the Phillies, he gave up 4 earned runs and 6 hits in just 2 1/3 innings pitched. The final few months over the season, just against the Phillies alone, he pitched 5 scoreless innings. His ERA dipped a full 1.5 post All-Star break, and his strikeout rates were significantly better. Now we talk about the stuff. Dude keeps the ball on the ground at a really good rate, which at Seattle is not necessarily the most demanding thing in the world because it is a pretty cavernous ballpark, but any reliever that can keep the ball on the ground is worth taking a look at. He's 94th percentile in fastball velocity. He doesn't get barreled. He had a sub 5% walk rate this year. All of those stats were in the 93rd percentile or better in 2025. So I think Ferrer is better than what my mind initially went to, even if you see that 4.48 ERA. But with all of this, I still don't necessarily know if it's the proper trade value for the Seattle Mariners, thinking about giving up a top 100 prospect and somebody at a position of value at the catcher position, even if he is blocked by Cal Raleigh. So I totally understand their thought of trying to get something for a guy that wasn't going to play, but I do think that it might be an overpay, even if it ends up being him settling into a nice role in the back end of the bullpen. But this is where we get to the Phillies. This is where we get to the big takeaway segment of the day. I needed to lay the groundwork of that conversation to get to where we're getting to. This tells me one thing above all else. The Phillies believe they're bringing JT Realmuto back. The Phillies believe that at some point in the next few weeks, JT is going to re-sign with them, and he's going to be their catcher, their starting catcher, at least for the next 2 seasons. Not because I think or they think that Harry Ford is definitively the best catcher available on the trade market, not because they don't value any of the catchers in free agency, but because teams that could potentially acquire a critical positional need after not needing to worry about it for basically the last decade, almost the last decade, the way that the Phillies have with JT Realmuto, would move a reliever, especially a reliever, on the final year of his contract to acquire a guy that could potentially be an everyday catcher for the better part of a decade in Harry Ford. If the Phillies were offered Harry Ford for Matt Strahm or Harry Ford for Tanner Banks and did not believe that they weren't going to bring back JT Realmuto, I think they would have done it. I think they would have done it specifically for Matt Strahm on the final year of his deal in a heartbeat. But because they didn't, and I'm not saying that they were definitively tied to Harry Ford the way that this trade lays out, but I believe that what this is telling you is that the Phillies are 100% convinced that JT Realmuto is going to be their starting catcher in 2026, or they have a definitive backup plan in place that did not contain or include Harry Ford being in that conversation. And again, if you're the Seattle Mariners, you look at Ferrer and you compare him to Strahm, and while I believe Strahm to be the better player, at this very moment, not maybe through the course of their career, maybe Ferrer continues to get better, but over the last 2 seasons, you've seen Strahm be a pretty productive member of the back end of the Phillies bullpen. I think the Mariners looked at this and went, we're going to go and take the opportunity to have a guy with 5 years of team control, 5 years of pre-arb and arbitration, where we know we're going to be able to kind of dictate what his salary looks like all the way through 2031. If the options are Matt Strahm or Jose Ferrer, contractually, Ferrer makes way more sense. If you're thinking about next year, a team that was on the doorstep of a World Series appearance, then I would understand why you would think about Matt Strahm, who would probably make the most sense for 2026 exclusively. But then you have to worry about free agency and all of that to move forward after the 2026 season. If Matt Strahm was available in trade markets, which he may be and he may not be, a catching prospect would have made a ton of sense to acquire, which tells me that either the Mariners weren't as interested in Matt Strahm as they were in Ferrer specifically for the contractual numbers that are attached, or the Phillies truly believe they know what their catching future lies, and I think it makes the most sense that they believe that JT is going to be their catcher in 26. I don't know how many years they end up signing for, and I don't know what monetary value they sign him for, but I think that tells me the Phillies believe that JT Realmuto is their catcher in 2026, and perhaps even into 2027 as well.